Douglas County Part Two. I had a lot more to talk about, and like if you missed the first part, scroll because it's right below this one. And like, let's go back to Douglas County. So we were talking about Stephen A. Douglas, who Douglas County is named after. I just got done talking about his Freeport doctrine and how he believed that territories could just pretty much ignore the Supreme Court decision, the Dred Scott decision. Now, why I want to come back and talk about that is that decision was super important because he is proclaiming the Freeport doctrine. He is essentially telling states and territories that they can ignore the Supreme Court and they can ignore this ruling specifically pertaining to slavery. That was not a popular move for him to do in the South. Douglas is also going to oppose the ratification of the Lecompton Constitution in Kansas. Remember, he's a big pusher of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and he's out there saying that now this Constitution that was created by the pro-slavery legislature, which he believed was a legitimate legislature, did not reflect the will of the people. Like I said in the last video, Douglas was a Jacksonian Democrat. He believed that the people were the ultimate will. He did not believe that the Lecompton Constitution, which allowed Kansas to be a slave state, reflected the actual will of the people in Kansas. So for that, he gets a couple of good marks. Douglas is a very complicated individual, especially when it comes to his views on slavery. Historians to this day cannot peg him as being pro-slavery or anti-slavery, mostly because he always favored the compromise position on slavery. The argument that people will make, and it's probably a legit one, is that slavery is not something you can really compromise about, considering that you're talking about keeping human beings as lesser than others. So, yeah, that's the problem that we fall into as historians when talking about Stephen A. Douglas. He was a big believer in the rights of the people. But, and there's always a but, that was only for those who were of the white race. He literally says, and I said this in the last video, I'm going to expand upon it here, that the founding fathers and the writers of the Declaration of Independence only gave those rights to white people, and that African Americans were not entitled to those. Those were his beliefs. So when I say that he might not have been pro or anti-slavery, he did hold beliefs that, I mean, even then people thought were racist at the time. Abraham Lincoln calls him out for those views during the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Now, ultimately, Douglas was a Unionist. He did believe the United States should stay together. He went down in the South and preached against secession prior to the start of the Civil War. He worked to come up with compromises, to come up with ways to keep the South involved in the United States, and not to secede. He did not want to see a civil war. He wanted to see the United States together. So, first time I had to do a part two. I'm kind of tired. That was fun. I might have to do it more often. But Stephen A. Douglas, Douglas County, that's one more down.